Hi, I'm Lisa Gardner, and I'm here today in my favorite city, Boston. Boston right now is the home of the Patriots, which we are now required by law to tell everyone is the 16-0 football team and all anyone wants to talk about. But what I like best about this city is I think it is a great place to hide dead bodies. In my current release, Hide, this park itself, Christopher Columbus Park, figures predominantly. Annabelle, the heroine, is often running through here with her dog Bella as she works right across the way at the Faneuil Hall, and she lives over there in the North End, which is the Italian section of Boston, and where she likes to dine at her favorite restaurant, Giacomo's. It is also at this very park that Annabelle meets up with a mysterious older gentleman that may just hold the key to some of the mysteries of her past. But today, my favorite city in the whole world is very, very cold. I'm thinking of setting all future novels in the Caribbean just to get away to the warmth, and I'm hoping that we can go inside to talk about my next novel. I started my career actually as a management consultant. I actually worked for a company right here in Boston, which was a lot of fun. However, I blame management consulting for what turned me into a suspense writer. Basically, like most entry-level positions, I was a research analyst. We are the overworked, underpaid, the vice presidents beat us up with tons of work to do on Friday night, make you work all weekend long. So basically being sleep deprived and frustrated all the time, myself and my fellow research analysts would spend our lunchtimes thinking of various bosses we would like to kill. And at a certain point, that list became very, very long. People knew I was a writer, so they started suggesting, Lisa, you should put all this in a book. And it turned out I thought that was an excellent idea. So I wrote my first novel, The Perfect Husband, where I killed like 22 people, some who may or may not have once been a boss. Research is still my favorite part of the writing process, and I spend 3 months out of the year-long cycle of writing a book doing the research. My favorite thing is hands-on research. I like going out in the field. I like talking to real people who have really interesting jobs. So for example, when I was working on Hide, my current release, I met with Boston police right down in Roxbury, and I gave them the parameters for my case. I have 6 bodies I want to hide in downtown Boston for 20 years. I want a great place where they could be hidden, and then I want a good reason why they have to be discovered now. Well, in that case, it was fun. It was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. All the detectives around the table were hands down. You have to hide them at Boston State Mental. It's this abandoned mental institute right in the center of downtown. The grounds have been abandoned for years, but are right now being razed to the ground, meaning you would discover something like a mass grave. Well, of course, this sounds perfect. How much more atmospheric can you have for a novel? So I call one of my best friends, and I'm like, we have to get to Boston State Mental like in the next 2 hours. So of course, by the time you did Boston traffic and everything, we hit this abandoned mental institute right as the sun is sinking and the shadows are growing long. You can hear the owls in the distance because some of it's now actually a nature preserve. And we're walking around these creepy old buildings with the shattered out windows and the roofs that are caving in. It was brilliant. You're like, this is absolutely the place to hide bodies in Boston. It's the best. I have a tendency to write my books based primarily on character, but sometimes character also suggests a location. So for example, the book I just wrapped up, Say Goodbye, is a continuing character for me. Kimberly Quincy, who readers also saw in The Killing Hour. Well, when we last saw her, she was working with the FBI out of Atlanta, which for the record is a lot warmer than Boston, and ended up being an excellent choice of a research destination and was a brand new place to hide dead bodies because I'd never done it before in Atlanta. But luckily I had a good friend who took my husband and I to Blood Mountain, because if you're going to hide dead bodies, Blood Mountain is the place to go. I actually have to blame my daughter for Say Goodbye. She went through a phase last year at the ripe old age of 3 where she became obsessed with spiders. Other kids get to read Fancy Nancy, maybe Clifford the Big Red Dog. We read 1001 Bugs and the Tarantula Keeper's Guide and the Big Bug Surprise. And after you spent so many nights reading about tarantulas, at a certain point you're like, I must do something with all this information. So I came up with a concept where the villain in Say Goodbye is actually raises spiders as a hobby, which proved to be a lot more interesting than I thought it would, and I hope it will be sufficiently creepy for the reader as well. With each book that I write as an author, I have a goal in mind, something that kind of makes it fresh and interesting for me, because I've been writing for 16 years, and something that I hope that will make it fresh and interesting for readers. When I started Say Goodbye, my goal was I wanted a really terrifying villain. And it was partly because my very first novel, The Perfect Husband, so many readers responded to the villain, Jim Beckett. I mean, I still get mail of people saying that was one of the villains that ranks right up there with Hannibal Cannibal. And apparently I haven't been quite as evil since, so I thought I should rectify that. So I came up with a very terrifying villain, but my goal was to also make him compelling. So as scary as he is, at the end of the book, it's a little bit more unsettling than that. So it is a violent book, but I think people will be pleased with the results. My novels are often based on true crime. In the case of Say Goodbye, it was actually based on a search team that exists in real life called NecroSearch International. They wrote a book called Leave No Stone Unturned, where each chapter is a case they worked on. NecroSearch is actually a team of volunteers, of scientists that have retired, and now in the second phase of their career, they help locate missing bodies. One of the things that comes across when you read Leave No Stone Unturned is the importance of having a body in a murder investigation, not only one for law enforcement. Here in the US, you will always have reasonable doubt if you can't actually produce a body. But two, the lack of closure it gives for families when, even though they're pretty sure, 20 years later, their loved one must be dead, they still don't have anything tangible to grieve. That really struck me as a concept, and so I came up with this driving theme in Say Goodbye, where statistically it's becoming clear that someone is preying on women in Atlanta, but no one can find any bodies. How do you begin to build that case? How do you get any traction as law enforcement? And how far might one very driven FBI agent, Kimberly Quincy, go to start making this case happen? I don't really consider myself to have arachnophobia. When I wrote The Killing Hour, I didn't worry about the snakes in that novel. I'm the first to say I believe the most dangerous predator out there is still human beings, and I'll take the spiders and snakes any day.